This is a student version of Google Classroom that I'm going to demonstrate some of the things that you need to do for your assignment that's due on Tuesday and for your other assignments as well. You can see that I'm in the same assignment as you would be in. Over on the right-hand side, you see your work. Right now, the only thing you see under your work is the template that I created for you and the rubric as well. You know that you need to add the spreadsheet, the copy of the spreadsheet of the data, the copy of the spreadsheet that is not shared with anybody. Remember, the actual data was shared with you and your partners. Everybody, including the person that did the sharing, must make a copy and include that copy with your Google assignment, with your Google Classroom. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go over on the right-hand side, add or create. I'm going to add something from my Google Drive. I'm going to go into my Google Drive here. My data, my copied data is in this folder. I can see that I've got the copy of test data right there. I'm going to add that. I'm not going to turn anything in right now because I'm far from being ready to turn anything in. But remember that everything you do for your lab should be within Google Classroom. Don't do it with a personal Google account. Don't do it outside of Google Classroom. Do it inside of Google Classroom so that everything is together. It's like a couple minutes ago when I handed back those quizzes. I said, it takes 2 seconds to put that quiz in your binder. Put it in your binder to stay organized, right? Let's put everything in our Google Classroom so that we stay organized. Now I'm going to click on that copy of test data and start doing some work with it. We have all kinds of data. We mentioned yesterday that the trial that I want to use is trial 4, just because it looked the best. So I'm going to delete everything except trial 4. Now, some of you yesterday when you were working on this were highlighting right here in row 1 over like this, or some of you are highlighting like this. That's not what we want to do. We want to highlight the actual columns by clicking on A, B, C, and so on, and dragging. If you highlighted the columns, the column headings, A, B, C, D, E, and so on, should become dark gray. So I'm going to delete these ones right now. Right-click, which on your Chromebooks is 2-finger touch, right? 2-finger touch on the touchpad, and then delete columns A through I. Now, I need to delete more of it too, right? So let's do the same thing for more columns. Delete these ones. I'm going to delete these, delete these ones as well, because the only 2 columns I want are time and position. I don't want to just delete the data, because then I'm going to be left with a bunch of columns that are empty. I want to delete the actual columns themselves. So it deletes the data and the columns and makes them beside each other. Got it? Now it comes time to actually plot the graph. You've gone through this before in Science 10, but we'll walk you through this steps of plotting the graph again this year. All right, now I'm going to actually plot the graph. Watch carefully as I do this and follow along and do this yourself as I go. I want to highlight my data. Don't highlight everything. Highlight your data. Doesn't matter if some of that data you know is going to be wrong. Doesn't matter. Highlight all of your data. Just your data, though. So I've done that now. All of my data is highlighted, not the columns. Okay, I don't want those column headings to be dark gray this time. I'm not deleting anything. I'm just highlighting the numbers. So everybody do that now. And then I want you to click Insert Chart. Insert Chart. Now, the chart that I get is usually not the one that I want. It's oftentimes comes up by default as a bar graph. I will never in Physics 20 or Physics 30 plot a bar graph, ever, ever. Now this one is closer. This is a line graph, but I also don't want a line graph. When I plot a graph in Physics 30, it will not be a line graph either. I always want my graph to be a scatter plot. Listen carefully to that. I always, every single time this year and next year in Physics 20 and in Physics 30, want my graph to be a scatter plot. 0 exceptions. Okay, I guarantee you this year I will see some of you plot graphs like this, line graphs. That's not what I want. Okay, go over here to chart type, scroll down, keep scrolling. Oh, there's my scatter chart right there. Now, sometimes my axes are labeled correctly by default. And in this case, you can see that's the case. I can see position with meters on the y-axis and time in seconds on the x-axis. Sometimes it labels it correctly for me by default. Sometimes it doesn't. If it does, great, saves you some work. If it doesn't, then you need to change it. In other words, if it labels it position but doesn't put the units in, then you need to put the units in. Sometimes it doesn't label it at all. You need to add your x and y axes labels. The title of your graph should always be, as we said yesterday, responding versus manipulated, or y-axis versus x-axis. Sometimes, for whatever reason, by default, Google Sheets titles it time versus position, or x-axis versus y-axis. That's wrong, and we're not going to blame Google Sheets for that. If you leave it as time versus position, you will lose that mark in your assignment, even if it's Google Sheets that did it for you. You're responsible for fixing it if it's not correct already. Now, you can see that I have a pretty good straight line here, right? This is almost a perfect straight line. But you can also see that I have some data here that looks like it was collected before my cart started moving. It's not okay to arbitrarily delete data. You can't just say, oh, I don't like this data, let's delete it. But if there's a good reason for deleting it, it is okay. There is a good reason for deleting it here. We can clearly see that this data was collected before it was supposed to. In other words, you pressed start on the data collection SparkView app before you actually pushed the cart. That's okay. Let's just delete that. It looks like I should delete up to about 0.5 seconds. So, watch carefully. I'm going to delete those rows. Don't highlight the data. Okay? Highlight the rows so that the rows become dark gray up to about 0.5 seconds-ish. And what do? Well, I'm going to right-click, but you're going to two-finger touch the trackpad, and I'm going to delete those rows, just like we deleted columns. And now my graph is better. Right now my graph is almost exactly a straight line, right? But we have to add to this now a trend line. In Science 10, did you guys ever plot trend lines? Lines of best fit? It's a line that represents the trend that's happening on this graph. Click on the graph, top right-hand corner, edit chart. So now you see all these options over here. I'm going to customize. So by default, it's on setup. I want to click customize. If I need to change the title or the axes, it's going to be under this setting, chart and axis titles. But I'm going to click, I don't need to do that, so I'm going to click on series. I scroll down, and there's an option under series for trend line. I want to make sure that it's by default a linear trend line. Now, I got to be honest, I'm not a big fan of the trend line that it just plotted because it kind of blends in with my data points. I'm going to change the color of that to red, just so I can see it a little bit better. I might make it a little darker as well by changing the opacity to 100%. Some of those options are up to you, what makes you happy with the way that it looks. Okay, I'm not going to be picky on that. You might even want to make the line thickness a little bit thicker. Don't make it too thick, because I want to see my points, right? But if you want to make it a little bit thicker to be more visible, that's fine. Now, the last thing that you're going to do with your graph is to label it. So go down here where it says label, none, change that. Don't say custom, say use equation. That's what you're going to do every single time in Physics 20 and Physics 30. Under label, click use equation. Now, you can see up here that the equation is labeled now. This is in the form of y equals mx plus b, which is the equation for a straight line graph, right? Math class, you remember that in Math 10? Equation for a straight line graph is y equals mx plus b. M is 0.346. That's the slope of the graph. Negative 0.0846 is the y-intercept of the graph. The slope of the graph, 0.346, is the velocity of the car. So what was the problem in yesterday's lab? What is the velocity of a dynamics card on a horizontal surface, or something to that effect? The answer to that problem for me would be, and this is my conclusion, the velocity of the dynamics card on a horizontal surface is 0.346. This is known because this is the slope of the graph. Now, if you leave everything here, I will not mark it. You got a beautiful graph here, but guess what that graph is worth right here in this Google Sheet? 0. I will not look at it. You've got to put this into your document. So let's go back to our classroom. Let's click on our template. That's the one with all the purple that I'm going to delete. Go down here to data. Let's delete that purple. And now let's insert my data. I'm going to insert my data by highlighting. I don't need to highlight run 4, although I can, it doesn't really matter. Just highlight your data, copy it, go into your template, and paste it. You should, when it gives you the option to link to spreadsheet, you should link it. That way, if you make any changes later on in your spreadsheet, it will be reflected in your lab, and you won't need to change it in 2 different places. So click paste. There's my data. Now go down to analysis. Delete some spaces here just to make it a little tidier. Go down to analysis. Delete this. That's going to be my graph. Go over here to your graph. Click on it. Copy the chart under the options. Go under analysis. Paste the chart. Once again, it's going to ask me to link it. You should click link to spreadsheet. And again, if you make any changes to it in your spreadsheet, it'll be automatically reflected in your document. And there's my graph. Then I'll go down here and I'll just answer my analysis questions. What does a straight line under position time graph represent? You'll figure that out. That's up to you. Why does the graph, or what does the slight curve represent? If you look at this closely, this looks like a really good straight line, right? But if you look at it very closely, these data points right here, these first couple are below the line, then it kind of goes a little bit above the line and below the line. This does curve ever so slightly. Not enough to worry about, but it does curve ever so slightly. What does that slight curve represent? Why would this experiment produce this slight curve?